No, I don't think so. I'll find on what? Yeah. All right. There's a truck outside. Is anybody? Take it unloaded. He's got serious stuff on it. Yeah. I don't have any.
Hello, everybody.
Howdy.
Hey,
Good. Councilman Griffin, you want me to pull some hours for you over there, man? Look like it's been a long week already.
Busy.
I'm having a little trouble pulling up my agenda for today's meeting. Oh, I got it. I think we're all on, right?
Yes, sir. I think everyone's on.
Okay. And Jennifer, for some reason, I'm having trouble pulling up my Public Works agenda, so I just pulled up the City Council agenda
Yes, sir.
meeting. Those are the basic things that's on the agenda.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's good afternoon, everybody. Let's call the meeting to order. And Councilman Shade, if you give us a few words, please.
Thank you, Councilmember, Mr. Chairman Waring. Almighty Father, we ask your blessing on us this afternoon. Look kindly upon your servants who are here to do the will of the city of Charleston and its people. In your name we pray. Amen.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Do we have a motion for the minutes?
move for approval.
Second.
Probably moved in second. Any question on those minutes? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
But the agenda said there were none at this time.
Well, thank you. I don't have my agenda, so I'm actually operating off of
So we just approved no minutes.
All right. Well, we can't be wrong.
Just a minute.
Well, thank you. As I said, I'm operating off the City Council agenda. Now we have some stormwater management updates on.
And we have some encroachment first.
Okay. All right, Mr. O'Brien, if you address those encroachments.
Yes, sir. Basically, we have irrigation, a fence, and a driveway, and these are all standard encroachments.
This is Jennifer. You've got some feedback on your end.
Right.
Ooh, that was helpful.
Is that better?
A lot
Yeah,
better.
I think it was Councilmember Appel, maybe.
Think so?
But on your encroachments, Mr. Chairman, Mayor, and members of the committee, pretty standard encroachments, a fence, driveway, irrigation, and also a bench on King Street. And we have approved and investigated all those and moved for approval and offer those as information to the committee.
Okay. Well, if it's just information, we don't need a motion on that, but thank you. Um, Before going on to the remainder of the agenda, I know we had some conversations about an issue that Councilwoman Jackson brought up about the private gate on a subdivision over there on James Island. Do we have any, does our legal department or anything have any information to share on that?
Mr. Chairman, before either Susan or Chip speaks, I got with Kim Granata, our building official, so I could get an update on the current number of permits or COs on the subdivision Deltare.
Good.
Currently, it appears that we have 20 permits and 14 COs. So we've had 14 COs issued and 6 outstanding permits.
And then 6 outstanding permits?
Yes, sir. That's permits that have been drawn for building construction. Yes, sir.
Okay. What's the total lots they had out there? Something like 27 or something like that?
Was 28. I'm not mistaken.
20. Mr. Mayor, you know, this goes back to the Raleigh, when Mayor Raleigh was mayor, and for new members of council, they had a subdivision out there, and under the guise of vandalism, they came to us and said they wanted to put up a temporary gate. Well, the temporary gate they put up is probably, I don't know, somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. Okay, it's certainly a permanent gate.
Gates.
Two gates. All right, good. And cause they, being on a public road, they want to restrict public access. So it's my opinion that we weren't dealt with clean hands on that one. And what they really want to do is have a gated community with public streets and still keep police protection, fire protection, et cetera, et cetera. So there was an agreement made basically that said, okay, once you get a certain number of lots built upon, then you know, the gates would be open. Well, nobody thought that was going to take, at least I didn't anyway, that was going to take, how many years it's been?
12.
How
12
many?
years.
No,
12.
I hadn't been on council 12 years, so
It was 2008.
since that agreement, it's been a whole lot, many more years, maybe not 12, because I'm in my 9th year on council when that happened. So certainly that has to be revisited. How could we have public streets being gated? Just by way of FYI, I was on the tourism management update plan, and they had a committee, believe it or not, that came with a suggestion to the update of that tourism management plan to put a gate at Meeting and Broad. That gate would open up at 7 in the morning and close at 7 p.m. And cause one issue I rules was, you do realize that that street is owned by the taxpayers, not private citizens. But you'd be surprised, there was a push for that. It didn't prevail, but there was a push, Mr. Mayor, to put a gate at Meeting and Broad, restricting public access to 12 hours a day. So in a smaller sense, obviously, I think that's what these people are trying to achieve here. So I think it definitely needs to be revisited. And I think Councilwoman Jackson is right to raise that issue. So maybe we can find out how many lots we have remaining in this agreement, and then look at that whole agreement. I don't even know how we could have done an agreement I mean, we were trying to show good faith, but they aren't. We were trying to show good faith to try to work with them, but it's a public street and the public should have access, the way I look at it. Anyway, Ms. Jackson, do you have any input before we hear from legal?
Yes, I really appreciate the opportunity to have this on your agenda, Chairman. And you're right. I just looked at the encroachment. The encroachment was issued in 2012, so it's been 8 full years since we took it on in good faith. And I think you're absolutely right. This has always been the intention to have a gated community. I've been doing a lot of homework about this. The more I think about it, the more I just feel like there's probably precedent in other places in the region that this happens. And I know we just don't have the, we don't have the staff or the ability to make people live up to their honorable agreements to the extent that we would expect them to do that. So there are 2 gates. If you drive up there, it looks like you're entering Williamsburg. They have these beautiful brick stanchions with the pineapple finials that are probably 12 feet tall, huge iron gates, and only a keypad, and the people have fobs. And what I did the
Mr. McQueen is showing. Excuse me, Mr. McQueen is showing the gated entrance while you're speaking here.
Yeah, so there's 2 of them. There's one at the intersection of Schooner Road and Tanner Trail Drive, and then another one that basically interrupts traffic as it travels down Parrot Creek, and it starts at a point where you go around the bend, and then the Belterre development starts, and so that's Parrot Point Drive. 2 identical gates on both ends of the development, the subdivision. So, but what really has gotten my dander up, the people that are, the properties have been turning over in recent years. I think, since the economy's been booming again and people have been flipping their vacant lots and building on them. And they're advertising completed houses. 2 properties turned over last year in 2019, and they're advertising them through MLS as a gated community. So, and I checked the deed records of those 2 properties. There's nothing issued in their deed that even declares that this is some sort of easement that will go away. There's no mention of it whatsoever. The 2 properties as they were being sold, the seller's disclosure just stated factually that there was an HOA that they paid dues to. There's no mention of gate, ownership or anything like that. So I feel like probably if we interviewed those people, they wouldn't even know that the gates are supposed to be open permanently. So
Right.
it has really, changed the dynamic here. And I do feel like the city, so the mayor asked me a week or so ago to give him a list of the owners. It's taken quite a while to do that, but 5 minutes ago, I sent you a list of all the current owners on record, Mr. Mayor, and he's going to look at the names and see if you can find contact somebody that, could be reasonable about going to their homeowners association. We don't have a record of who's the president. I don't know if they ever meet. They have a property management company, which I will contact next. Property owner that might be the most agreeable to live into the honor of the encroachment agreement is St. James Anglican Church. They were the owner of the entire property when it was sold and subdivided to Parrot Creek LLC or whoever were the partners to do that. And they retained one final property. So they are current owner of one piece of vacant land. And I know the leadership of that church, several of us do. So I think that might be a place to start. But anyway, I feel very strongly about this. I don't want to wait until the 22nd house is finished and occupied. I feel like we've got to be able to do something now because this is happening. Another fact is a lot of the properties are still listed as vacant and the county's not even charging them taxes based on their improvements. So, a lot of due diligence has not happened with this gated community that is not intended to be that secluded. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate this opportunity to vent. I'm sorry that I'm doing it on Zoom.
No, you're not venting. I'm glad you brought it to bear because really, it's my opinion, but they're just taking advantage of the goodwill of the city. Mr. Mayor, on this one, our legal counsel and the committee at the time worked with them on that in good faith. At the time, they had, I think, maybe 2 houses in there, and their complaint was, nefarious things were going on in there, and vandalism was going on in there, and the like. Because years and years ago, we built the subdivision about 20 years ago, and we had some similar things going on. We called a policeman. The policeman called Chief Greenberg. He put some patrols back in there, and that took care of the problem. So today, with 14 COs being issued, it is not the lonely cul-de-sac, if you will, that it once was.
No.
So I think we get our legal department involved. But Mr. McQueenie, do you and the legal department have anything to add to this conversation?
No, I think if we wanted to get too involved in it, I'll try to reach out to a representative of the owner. I think somebody told me that Sid Boone may represent
He
them.
was the attorney at the time, right?
Okay, I'll give him a call, but yeah, I mean, I've looked at it. It was, as Councilmember Jackson probably knows it better than I do, but there were 28 lots. It's a 28 lot subdivision. It sounds, according to Tom, we've got 20 building permits. It's sort of ambiguous. One part says the 21st certificate of occupancy, another one says the 22nd. I think the big issue from the city's perspective, the city couldn't close down a public street or let a public street be permanently closed down to travel, permanently. This was intended to be and is labeled a temporary easement, but the agreement doesn't have a sunset provision except for the CO provisions. So kind of the issue, and I need to do a little bit more research into it, but also talk to Sid Boone. Kind of the issue is whether or not there's sort of a reasonable time period in which that agreement expires in the absence of pulling the 22 or 21 permits. Obviously, I don't think a court would say that this is, if they never pull 21 or 22 permits, this can go on for 100 years or 200 years. I think there's a limit to that. The question is, what is it?
And plus, with them advertising it being a gated community, so
and that's problematic too. That's kind of why we don't allow that.
Right.
I remember also looking at it, and I'll try to send you the information. There's supposed to be a 20-foot pedestrian access point into the neighborhood. I'd like to ride out there at some point to just sort of look at the front of it, but there's supposed to be I think a 20-foot wide or 20-foot clear. It may be less than 20 feet, but I remember reading about the clear pedestrian access area.
There is a path on one of the gates. I'm not sure about the second one, but there's a path that goes around the gate.
I'm gonna finish with Mr. McQueen. I'm gonna recognize Councilman Shahid.
Thank you.
No, let Mr. McQueen finish, and then I'll come to you.
Okay, thank you.
But that's all I had. That's what I'm looking at, and I think it's worth calling Sid, or if we know somebody else that represents them, trying to figure out a way to deal with this, because it's 8 years is a long time for that.
No, I agree.
That to go on and the city street to be closed and basically become a private gated community.
Right, that they advertising. Thank you, Mr. McQueen. Councilman Shahid.
And I think that Mr. McQueen was addressing this. So there's just a pass gate that's out there. There's not a guardhouse or anything like that out there, is there?
Well, no, not that I'm aware of. This is the plans that were actually attached to the encroachment permit application. So, I mean, it's a substantial thing. I think the idea was that this would remain open once they reach the permitting requirements, but the wall outside of the right of way would remain there. The gate part, I think, is supposed to be which is right here, which is where the public right of way would be. And the idea would that those would remain open once it reached a certain point. I believe, I haven't verified it, but all the brickwork is outside of the public right of way area.
So what happens in the event a fire truck or a police officer needs to go through there? What happens now?
They're supposed to have some sort of emergency or remote access, is my understanding. But I'll ask Sid specifically about that to make sure.
We may want to ask the our chiefs.
Say, this is Tom for environmental services for collection. We have a code that our drivers have to punch in to get in.
So to have any kind of city service out there, there's a hindrance to that. I mean, this is a safety issue from a different perspective of a safety issue. When you have the delay to make sure you have access to get a fire truck in there or a police officer in there, and hopefully we have the code to get in and out that truck does or that officer does, that is a safety issue. I mean, that's probably one reason why we don't have these gated communities like that we do. Is just this is silly. I mean, it really is kind of silly. And I think Councilmember Waring, I don't know, this is not in your district, but that other subdivision and for Ashley Hall Plantation Road.
Right, Ashley Harbor.
Ashley Harbor, they are quote unquote gated, aren't they?
They gated, but believe it or not, that was the last gated community built in the city of Charleston.
Yeah.
I forget for that same reason, but for the most part, their gates stay open though. From the standpoint like a policeman, they have a guard out there, but if you had a fire or something like that, you'd have to wait for the gate to open.
Right.
They privately maintain roads too, because that's the big thing here is where these are public roads that are gated. These aren't,
Right.
Usually if you have a gated community, because Charleston County allowed it 5 or 10 years ago, you just have private roads within the gated community. And then there's a way to set it up with fire and emergency response. But if they're publicly maintained roads, that there should be no gate.
I agree.
At least not in any permanent sense.
Right. Councilman Miller, Bill?
Yeah, how could I not have a comment on
I
this?
know you're gonna have something.
We were waiting.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked at any of the documents, obviously, but it occurs to me, I mean, could we pass an ordinance revoking the easement on the basis of public safety or some other type of police power? I mean, essentially, if we can make an argument that this is somehow, is outside the scope of the easement or outside the intention of the scope of the easement, it's a trespass. It's a private trespass across a public right of way.
Yeah,
And just as a practical matter, maybe that'll get the other side's attention and we can work something out.
That's a great idea. I think you, Councilman Shade and Councilman Pell, maybe if you all can get with Mr. McQueenie and the mayor on that, I look forward to the results. Any more input on that? Thank you, Council Lady Jackson, for bringing that one forward. So now, the stormwater management update. Is that going to be Mr. Fountain?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, good, thank you.
So the first item on there is the acceptance of the 2018 FMA grant award for the acquisition of 2 properties with a federal award of $481,794.35.
So moved.
With a city match of $53,532.72.
Probably moved by Councilman Griffin. Is there a second up there?
Second.
Probably moved and seconded by Councilman Shade. Continue, Mr. Fountain.
This is the city matching funds are from the drainage fund. There's one property here within the Shadamoss area and one property within the Willow Walk area on James Island.
All right. Any questions on that? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The ayes have it. Mr. Fountain, item 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the project updates, the monthly project updates at our first meeting this month. The Spring Fishburne Phase 3 project, we're actually getting very close to wrapping up this project. Should be complete within the next couple of months. Today we had our actual penultimate, as Steve would say, tunnel inspection, which is just verifying any punch list or creating any punch list items that need to be addressed for the final walkthrough to be able to sign off on all the underground tunnel work. The Harmon Field surface connection work is also complete, where we start replumbing the drainage piping into the deep tunnel system. And we'll be continuing over the next month or so with the remaining surface restoration of those surface sites. The Phase 4 of the Spring Fishburne project, that's the outfall and wet well between the 2 bridges. All of the pipe piles are now completed on that project. So that's that loud pile driving that you typically hear of the like kabang, kabang. That's been completed for this project. We also have 82% of our sheet piling installed. Those are the large iron thin walls that kind of go down in the soil to hold back dirt so we can do excavation work. 82% of that's complete on the outfall and on the wet well structure, extending the outfall extending out in the marsh, the wet well being the large excavation between the two bridges. And they are underway on doing actual excavation work as well on the soil within those structures. The low battery project, this is actually a pretty neat time to go see the low battery work that's going on, or look at the website and see the live camera feed. From that, we are actually in the process of removing the exterior concrete wall, the facing of the wall, and basically pouring the new slabs that go in to create the new, eventually they'll create the new walkway and the new wall on that project. And they're doing it in a segmented manner because as we remove, obviously as we remove the wall, you also remove the protection of storm surge coming through. So they'll come in and take out only as much of the wall as they can come back and pour concrete for very quickly. And they have kind of a neat system with like temporary flood wall bags that kind of provide that protection in the meantime while they're doing the excavation work. And so that's marching down. We're making really good progress on that project. It's going very well. Lake Dotterer, we have moved into preparing the construction drawings and encroachment permits for those pipes that we'll be looking to ramjack under the Glen McConnell widening. Danoon Drive, this is the rear yard drainage improvements in Chatham-Moss. We have a notice to proceed issued to our contractor. The contractor's working on their mobilization right now, and we should begin work within the next week on that project. Lord Calvert, this is a roadside drainage improvement project in West Ashley. The pipe and box installation work is all complete. We've replaced all of the failed pipes in the ground, worked our way around a number of sewers, and we're working through restoration on that project. We will have one more very minor change order on that project for just over $5,000 from having to avoid 2 more sewer conflicts. We're able to shift to some elliptical pipe and do it at very low cost, but we now are at the point of just backfilling the project. So that should be the last item with any surprise. Now we'll just be repouring concrete driveways and doing standard work. Sherwood Forest, that's another rear yard drainage improvement project. That one we have we visited the site with the fence contractor last week, and we're scheduling the fence removals. We'll go in then and do the tree removals after the fence removals, install the drainage ditch on the easements we've acquired, and then come back and restore those fences. So all of that work is under contract at this point. We're just moving forward with it. Lockmore Terrace, this is a drainage easement question in Chatham-Moss. There's an option to abandon a portion of that easement. There's not really anything currently constructed in the easement. It's just sort of a set aside in case a system ever were to be constructed. We visited a few of the homeowners surrounding the easement. 3 of them so far have been in favor. We're still waiting to get a response from 2 more. We missed them when we did our visits, and we haven't heard back from our handouts and leave behind. So we'll try another couple rounds with those homeowners to get some clarification. Mueller Drive, this is another rear yard drainage project in West Ashley. We have all of our notice work complete, and we'll be doing our site visits this week and discussing it with the residents that back onto the drainage and handing out the flyers and informational packages. Arrowwind at Emerald Forest, this is drainage inlet installation in West Ashley at the intersection of Arrowwind and Emerald Forest. That contractor has started work and has excavation in process, and they're basically adding another drain in to help with some road ponding in the travel way. The King Uji project, this is the large scale drainage project, obviously at the intersection of King and Uji. The first phase of that project was doing the improvements in the surface collection system. That's like the pipes and inlets that take the water from the street and try to convey it somewhere. The first phase, we've finished our construction design work. We've gotten our DOT encroachment permits at this point. We're finalizing some temporary construction easements that we need in order to do the excavation work to install those pipes. And we're also coordinating with CWS because CWS is asked to basically do an in-contract utility work for a significant amount of water line improvements that they were looking at in the same intersection. So we're trying to collaborate between the 2 of us so we're not both ripping apart the road and then restoring it back into existing condition. That MOU will likely be coming to the Public Works utility committee in the next month or so, if we can get that finished up to make sure we stay on pace with this contract. This contract will then, of course, be followed up with a design contract to do the design work for the pump station. We do have a 30% preliminary engineering design complete for what that pump station would look like. We're starting to talk with some of the stakeholders, including the housing authority and some of the adjacent property owners, to make sure everyone's on board with what we think will work from a 30% perspective before we come back to Public Works Utilities with decision on whether to keep moving forward with that approach. We think it's a good approach at this point. We just want to make sure we're talking to all the people who are engaged in that project. The Central Park drainage project, we did receive our draft report for the improvements needed for drainage throughout that basin. We're reviewing that internally right now. Hopefully we'll have it kind of back and forth with the consultant, get it finalized and have it available to discuss with the public within the next month or so. Barbary Woods, this is the Johns Island drainage improvement area. Our selection committee has met and identified the 2 most qualified engineering firms in their opinion, which they're doing interviews with those 2 firms this week. And then we'll be bringing a negotiation with the most qualified firm, hopefully to Public Works Utilities Committee for consideration for that design task. Windermere drainage improvement, that's the improvements in the new outfall that we're looking at in the Windermere community in West Ashley. That the request for qualifications, the RFQ is closed. We had a large number of interested firms, and the committee is currently reviewing those proposals to, again, evaluate which firms are the most qualified firms, or whether we need to do interviews moving forward. The Forest Acres project, AT&T is working with DOT on the encroachment permits. They have enough information from us at this point that they're able to move forward with their encroachment permits, and the city is finalizing its design work to combine phase 2A and phase 2B together into just a single phase 2. And since we'll have a little bit of the delay while AT&T finishes up their work, but that one's moving forward now and looking like we have a good path forward. Also, we are looking, as we discussed last meeting, at kind of getting a revamping of our website project plans and kind of getting a more graphic update so that we can also present that to you and give you that link for these meetings. So you kind of have a little more information in writing and have some graphics and some pictures associated with these projects, because it's starting to be quite a list of updates to keep in your head as we go through this process. And I always am happy to email out kind of any updates if the committee would like them, since we are really starting to get to a good 5 to 10 minutes of me just talking about all of the things going on in all of the projects.
Well, Mr. Fountain, I don't want you to think we don't like hearing what you do. I mean, you're doing good things, and believe me, when you share this information with us, it's like throwing a rock in a pond. It reverberates out to council and then obviously the community. So, I mean, I really appreciate what you do. I'm gonna come to Councilman Shayade and then Councilman Griffin in that order.
Mr. Fountain, can you do me 2 favors? On the Mueller Street project, would you mind just reaching out to Mr. Chad Tipley and giving him an update for me?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And can you make that sound again about the boom boom that you did earlier?
The ka-chunk, yeah.
There you go. That was
it is. I mean, if anyone, I'm sure some of the residents downtown who are near some of the pile driving, it is a memorable noise when you are having a pile driving operation. So I think some of the residents who front Lockwood there will be very happy that that portion of the project is completed. Now they will just have some backup alarms and things, but that's a little more intermittent and varied than that continual pile driving, which can be pretty disruptive.
All right, Councilman Griffin, now you're on mute, so you got to unmute yourself. Councilman Griffin,
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Great.
I like to use my space bar when I talk. I just kind of want to touch on this, and I want to thank Matt for all the hard work on this shadow moss abandonment that we've been working on together since late last year. And this is actually something that I think we'll see a lot more of throughout the city. I'm going to give y'all sort of a recap of what's happened there. I was approached by a constituent who has a lot of water that comes into his backyard during rain events. And after looking at the plat and his land, we all realized that he actually has an easement that runs right through his backyard for what could be a city ditch. Now, if you priced it out on what it would take to have it done, it would probably be a 6-figure project. And the cost benefit ratio and the outcome of what it would take, we're not going to spend $100,000 plus to help one person's backyard drain a little bit better. It doesn't really make sense for us. So he's offered to do it himself. But in order for him to do it himself, he'll need us to abandon the easement. So Matt has now gone around and started knocking on the doors to make sure the neighbors are okay with it. And I think if all the neighbors are okay with it, I would love for this committee to help this gentleman get this easement abandoned so that he can do his own drainage work back there. Because when it rains, it pours. And because of the spot that he's in, he's looking at water up to his back porch every time we have a major rain event. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I think there's probably some other properties in neighborhoods like Chatham, some of these bigger developments that were kind of cookie cutter neighborhoods that have easements that really might not make sense for us. You know, I applaud this gentleman for stepping up and saying that he wanted to do it himself, but he wasn't going to do anything until we abandon it. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I think that I'll probably see a few more of these over the course of my time, but just appreciate y'all and really appreciate Matt. This is not an easy thing to do because we're not really in the business of abandoning drainage easements, but this makes sense. And I think sometimes we just have to take the common sense approach on this. So appreciate y'all listening to that.
Councilman Griffin, I do have a question of you. I guess Matt can chime in on this too. Hypothetically, we abandon this and he fixes his issue, but then it creates an issue for his neighbors. What position does that put the city in?
Well, that's really the reason why we're going around and talking to the neighbors about it. I think Matt, when he's talking to them, is doing investigation of what kind of impact it would have. I'm pretty sure that he would still have to submit all plans for what he would plan to do back there. He's kind of explained it to us what he plans to do anyway. But I think that we would be watching it closely to make sure he wouldn't have any negative adverse effects on his neighbors.
Okay, I know. Listen, we got some legal minds on this phone call, Ms. Ardina and Mr. McQueenie. Y'all have any input on that? I mean, if we give up the easement, he fixes his problem, and I don't know, the neighbors 3 doors down begins to get a problem as a result. Are we then obligated to? We have an obligation as part of the city. That's all I'm saying.
Councilmember Waring, this is Susan. We might be able to work out an agreement with him, which would relieve us from that. But I think we really would need to look at the situation closely, but we'll try to work it out. We'll try to work with him and the neighbors and see where we go.
Okay, great. I just mean, just be mindful of that. That's all.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any more project updates, Mr. Fountain?
Mr. Chairman, only on the floodplain management, we have just one update this week on the floodplain side. With the buyout grant, obviously that went to Public Works Utilities today, the FMA grant. So we'll be receiving that award to move forward to those 2 properties. And that probably sounds very familiar in that I think maybe 2 meetings ago we received an award from HMGP for 2 homes, one of which was in Shadow Moss as well, and one of which was also on Willow Walk. So between the 2 grant awards, we actually have 4 more homes that we'll be acquiring in those flood-prone areas. So I think that's a good continuation with the grant work for this year.
Okay, all right, good. Thank you. Well, let me go back to the updates. I want to add a new one. Mr. Mayor, at the last, well, whenever the last West Ashley Revitalization Commission meeting, you, Councilman Moody, myself, had a sidebar on a potential park that they're doing in the county where the old Piggly Wiggly site was in Pear Point. I think it's a collaboration between the county and the St. Andrews PSD for Greenbelt funds, for some of the county Greenbelt funds. But I knew there was an issue there that potentially could have some effect with drainage in the Church Creek drainage basin. Mr. Fountain, have you had any conversations on that?
We have, Mr. Chairman. We had 2 different meetings. One kind of one early conceptual meeting with a little bit of general information, then one more detailed follow-up meeting with the county and with Sanders PSD and a consultant that they're working with to provide our perspective from what we've seen in the Dutch dialogues and what we've seen in our study in Church Creek and what some opportunities might be to improve stormwater quality primarily with that parcel.
Okay. Are there any chances to improve the any stormwater issues in Church Creek with that?
I think there's some good opportunity for stormwater quality for trying to improve like contamination issues and things of all of the water coming off of the impervious surfaces and the roads right into the kind of the freshest part of the marsh there at the entrance into the river.
Right.
Quantity is a little more challenging. You can certainly get a minor improvement by taking some of that water and slowing it down. You're not likely on a smaller site kind of at the very far end of the basin like that to see a major improvement in quantity, but you know, it is sort of that every drop counts perspective that it's still a good project to do.
Okay, all right, good. Councilman Griffin, are you familiar with that? I know Councilman Shealy is, but I didn't know whether you're familiar with that project at all.
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay, good. All right, good. I'm glad to hear the follow-ups on that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Fountain on that. We've already done the update on Belterra. I think I kind of jumped that in front of put the horse in front of the carriage a little bit, but I think it worked out. Is there any other information to come before the committee?
Do we adjourn?
Wait, Mr. Mayor has his hand up. Mr. Mayor?
To add to your discussion about that project.
Oh, thank you.
Let's call it the old Piggly Wiggly.
Right.
I heard that the Greenbelt Review Committee did not approve it based on nothing but price, that it would be the most expensive cost per acre of any Greenbelt application. However, the whole Greenbelt Committee then votes on it, and then County Council votes on it. So
right.
Councilman Moody, and I just saw Councilmember Griffin raise his hand, so he might have some new information that I hadn't heard yet about County Council. But the preliminary vote was not favorable. But again, it can be overridden by either the Greenbelt Committee or the County Council. And I believe if they're successful in getting that approval by County Council, suits me fine. And our contribution could be to help make a stormwater project occur there on the site once they get it approved.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for your engagement on
Mr. Chairman,
that. Councilman Griffin?
I actually went to that meeting. I sat through that meeting for several hours that day. And I'll tell you that the subcommittee for the Greenbelt Advisory Board on that particular day was dissatisfied with all the projects presented and actually voted them all down. And another project was right down the road at the end of Kennerty Drive. It was another potential big park down there. And basically their words were, this should be a city project, not a St. Andrews Parks and Playgrounds project. Now, that's their opinion. And we all know that everybody has an opinion and most people stink. So I don't think a subcommittee should be making a decision like that, especially since not one of the subcommittee members lives over in that area and understands the impact that it could have. There's plenty of reasons why this is a great project. And number one, there are definitely reasons why the city would benefit from this. Number one, you have a potential for a drainage project, whether it's a very beneficial one or not. The property ties right into Church Creek. So I'm sure we could find some way to make that a positive. Number two, you're taking a eyesore, a complete eyesore that is now a truck parking lot. And all those trucks are parked there illegally. I don't know why we don't go out and write some tickets, because there's 20 to 30 vans and tractor trailers parked there every night. And it's pathetic and it looks terrible. But that's what it has become. You could turn it into a beautiful park that also has potential for retail up at the front. And in that proposal, the St. Andrews PSD would move their fire station across the street to that parcel as well. Now, as we all know, that fire station serves a lot of city residents as well through our mutual aid agreements. So we would definitely have, there would definitely be a lot of positivity towards that project. The St. Andrews PSD, St. Andrews Parks and Playgrounds, the county and the city should all come together and try to fund that project. And I'm sure if we look deep, we could probably find a couple $100,000 somewhere to really make a good statement that we stand behind that project. But that is one of the biggest eyesores in all of Charleston County. And it's going to take a collective approach to make it happen, but the mayor's absolutely right. The subcommittee can make one decision, then the Greenbelt Advisory Board could come up with another, and then Charleston County Council could override both of them. So it's still so preliminary. But I would love for us to not let this thing die. And if we could all just come together and keep this as maybe a standing item on this committee, just something to be brought up maybe once a month, just so we're up to date of what's going on. But it would be a shame if this project fell through the cracks.
Mr. Mayor?
I just want to reiterate that I think the city would support the project. I would just point out that the property still is in the county and not in the city. It's a donut hole. So if
Yes,
there's
sir, you're right about.
if there's some parking issue with trucks or other things, we need Councilmember Moody and the Sheriff's Department to address that.
Yeah, thank you both of you all. I mean, Councilman Griffin, for your input. The mayor's been engaged on this one early, so I think we're all on the same page on this one. And yeah, I'll keep it on the agenda because I think that's going to come to a head sometime, maybe this summer. Sooner rather than later, let's put it like that. With that, any final comments to come before the committee? By the way, while I have Councilman Shayed there, when we get off this call, I'm going to, if I can give you a call right quick. I've got an issue I want to run by you. Okay.
No problem.
All right. Well, by that, we take a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Properly moved, and by acclamation, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
All right. Have a good one now. Stay safe.
See ya.